You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
Wait, what? Onlookers recoil from Trump's bizarre family threesome remarks, based on an article by Benito L. Kelty. The presidency as family joke, public office, private appetite. Donald Trump turned the opening of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library into another performance of personal decay. The source material centers on the grotesque remark about a threesome with his sons, but the deeper offense is simpler. He used the presidential stage to turn public ceremony into family branding, then made the whole thing about himself. That is not random weirdness. It is the governing style of a man who treats institutional power as a prop and the presidency as a venue for narcissistic improvisation. Who actually holds power? The people with actual institutional power here are not the onlookers recoiling online. It is Trump, speaking as president at a presidential library event, with Don Jr. and Eric in the audience. He chose the venue. He chose the language. He chose to make the moment about himself and his sons. That matters because the problem is not merely that he said something bizarre. The problem is that the office itself is being used to launder private obsession through public authority. The White House becomes a family stage, and the state is expected to absorb the embarrassment without consequences. The trick of the shock. The reporting leans into the shock value, and sure, the line was obscene and absurd, but outrage over the phrasing can become its own dead end if it stops there. Trump thrives when the conversation gets trapped at the level of grotesquerie, because then the larger pattern disappears behind the theater. The larger pattern is corruption of attention. He says something outrageous, people scramble to react, and the actual structure of power stays untouched. The spectacle is not a side effect. It is part of the governing method. Misreading the damage. This is where weak political framing does its usual damage. The story invites readers to treat the moment as a bizarre verbal slip, maybe a sign of senility, maybe a joke that went too far. That is too gentle. Even the source notes that he was using a teleprompter, so this was not some spontaneous verbal accident that can be waved away as confusion. It was a prepared appearance at a formal event, and he still chose to reach for incestuous innuendo while invoking Medal of Honor winners and dead presidents. That is a political culture of entitlement and degradation, not a harmless gaffe. The real pattern. The point is not only that Trump is vulgar, it is that he is always collapsing public office into private self-worship. And too many institutions keep treating that collapse as a matter of personality instead of power. His sons in the audience, the presidential library, the Medal of Honor reference, the dead Roosevelt name dropping, all of it is a pageant of inherited status, borrowed legitimacy, and zero accountability. That is the pattern. Authoritarian politics does not always arrive as a manifesto. Sometimes it arrives as an insult dressed up as confidence, with institutions standing there pretending not to notice what has already been broken. What this means, the scandal here is not embarrassment. It is normalization. A president can stand in front of a national audience, turn civic ritual into family spectacle, and reduce institutional seriousness to a smirk, while everyone else is left arguing about how weird it sounded. That is how democratic erosion works in plain sight. Power acts shamelessly. The press gets stuck describing the odor, and the country is told to confuse degradation with noise. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Raw Story for today's article, with the automated voice of Joe. Thanks for listening.